Alright, it's 8 degrees here in Chapel, Nebraska. 8 degrees. Ain't no heat here. It's cold. There's people in Boulder, Colorado, and Denver, Colorado, Cheyenne, Wyoming. They're homeless out in this shit. Got a roof over my head. Keeps the ground from getting wet. Keeps my clothes from getting wet. Y'all gotta think about. When you're homeless, you ain't got no dryer to dry your clothes up. Take my hat off. I don't know if you can see any steam rising off my head. Snow, it gets on the top of your shoulders and on the top of your hoodie. And the heat from your head, it melts it. Turns into ice. Soaks you. You get a bone chill. Soaks the ground, and you gotta sleep on that. Soaks everything. That's not what this video is about, though. This video is about the evidence here on YouTube. Evidence here on YouTube. It shows how Shannon Alvarado and Rick get. It shows the words of the people I've been talking about. Those people's voices, not mine. Yes, my voices are in here too. There's now over 200 conversations recorded on this very YouTube, if not more. You get to hear Alyssa Rainwater making claims about Amanda Jonas and how she was going to investigate Ted Bollinger. You get to hear from Amanda Jonas how that ain't the case. You get to hear from Amanda Jonas about how she didn't have her body cam on. Imagine that. While I'm telling them about the issues I'm trying to get changed so that people can have an honest day in court, Amanda Jonas was doing the very same thing I speak out about. She was helping my predators. She was helping her fellow officers. Officer Burke was involved in Natalie's case. He was supposed to call me to investigate that, but he never did. I knew I recognized his award-winning smile. You get to hear Mandy Hughes talking about how she couldn't go in with me because she had warrants. Now, my public pretenders, they should have been calling witnesses. They should have been looking at evidence. They never did. They never did. You get to see evidence from the evidence bag from Officer Brian Valenzuela of the Sheridan Police Department. Meanwhile, the case that he was investigating wasn't in Sheridan, was it? No, it wasn't. You got to hear from Jayhawk about his son living with Ken Wilson and Leah Plunkett. Their drug antics, Leah being a prostitute, being a drug dealer, dealing in pills. They also deal in hallucinogens. You got to hear from Miss Peaches about that whole thing with the Mexican family. About how she tried to go in at least 3 times, other than the times that I was speaking about where I was present. I wouldn't take it. Got to hear Erin Cockerham talk about how she tried and they wouldn't take it. None of that was allowed in any of my court dates, was it? You got to see stuff between me and Karamia about how she was threatening Erin Cockerham. And mind you, that conversation that I recorded with Karamia was after she did that fucked up bullshit. After she destroyed them GoFundMes that were supposed to be to help me out. Because my disability money was all eaten up by Ken and Leah, and then eaten up by the courts by an officer who assaulted me. And the DA who was covering for the wrongdoing of those officers. See, these public pretenders blame it on the DA. Ain't it my public pretender's job to get that evidence, to call witnesses? Ain't it? You got to see how that evidence bag that was labeled in as evidence. No, it was just labeled in as property. All that evidence that I took around everywhere that I went, every court date, every meeting with the public pretenders they repeatedly didn't show up to, every meeting I was supposed to have with their investigators that they didn't show up to. You got to hear from Steve Tombleson about how we tried, them public pretenders wouldn't look at it. No matter what, them public pretenders wasn't going to do their damn jobs. No matter what. Got to hear from Tabby about how her ex was abusive. When I said that he was calling 3-year-olds cunts, she knew exactly who I was talking about. You wonder why. You got to hear from Miss Peaches about the situation at Todd's, about how scary that was for me. It was scary for Chloe, too. It was scary for Todd, too. You got to hear me thank all these people for what they did. Because I am grateful. You got to see some of my hospital paperwork showing that I was telling the truth about Virginia. I was telling the truth about my back, about autism. You got to see evidence that there were inmates that were trying to report about what was going on. But then again, my predators have control of a lot of the evidence. My predators were the police and the Bollingers. And the courts and the public pretenders. They were recorded. I recorded them breaking the law. You got to hear the excuses that the police made. Now, the things that I had witnesses for, those witnesses spoke up. admitted I was telling the truth. The parts where I had witnesses, the police had to admit. Officer Hahn, prime example right there, had to admit that I went in there with Molly Smith because Molly Smith went in with me. But he magically couldn't remember me chasing him around Chapel, Nebraska the very next day. Magically could not remember that. You got to hear conversations between me and Brenda Dickinson, Aunt B. You got to hear Rayanna admitting she fucked up. You got to hear me admitting that I fucked up. You got to see the conversations between me and Natalie. You got to see the conversations between me and Maddie. And between me and Joanna Taylor Smith. All showing that I was telling the truth all along. The police in Arapahoe County, they got control of the evidence. The evidence, the video evidence of the jails that should have been shown in court. I held my phone long enough to record some of the videos that are still on Facebook. They're still on my Facebook. My Facebook hasn't been destroyed, which is one of my biggest fears. Despite all of those people doing everything in their power to try to shut down my Facebook, those judges conspired to prevent me from having an honest day in court. The public pretenders conspired with the DA's office to prevent me from being able to show evidence. They conspired with the police to prevent me from showing evidence. They conspired with the Bollingers to prevent me from being able to go to court. You got to hear from Katie Cahill about the bullying that she endured from the Bollingers, about how she made a Facebook group for Natalie to begin with, and some of the people that I spoke out about, including Kara Johnson Miles, hijacked it from her. It's all on my Facebook. It's here on YouTube too. You got to hear from Brett Roloff about how I let him know that I wasn't going to go to North Carolina to see him while he was living there because it was too close to the Bollingers, and I wanted Natalie and her family to feel safe. You got to see evidence, see it with your own two eyes, hear it with your own ears. You got to see the evidence and hear it. The meth that was present there when I got to Bristol, Virginia. You got to see slander by hospital staff. Slander that never should have been there. That slander that I had to endure. They tried pulling that shit in my court date in Rawlins, Wyoming, my first one, while I was in the jail. Started claiming that I was shoplifting in Wyoming when I was 3. They had a whole list of stuff that they put into my court date there. I said, "Hey, hold on a second. You gonna say that I got a criminal record from when I was 3 years old for shoplifting?" They had about 20 things on that list that happened before I was 10 years old. But it wasn't me that committed those crimes. They should have looked at my age. You got to hear from Ryan Ingersoll about how those children were behaved at her place, about how Ryan was her ex-husband when she tried to help. You got to hear from Brandon Ratner about a lot of the situations, me and him talking about that. You got to hear from Todd about how he's trying to clean his life up. Maybe the guy I'm staying with is asleep now and the TV's off. If I go downstairs in the warmth to work on this stuff, it's gonna wake him up. He ain't gonna take too much of that. I try to make a habit of being quiet, not disrupting his life, disrupting it as little as possible. Because I got to. If I disrupt his life too much, I end out in the snow. You got to hear from James Payton about how he admitted that he pushed Jamie, about how she was hitting him in the face. You got to hear Jamie screaming at me when her boyfriend found out about her other boyfriend because of a video that I made. You got to see people harassing me. A lot of those people that harassing me, I blocked them from my Facebook, from my YouTube. You're gonna slander me, you can do it elsewhere. You guys want to be mad at me for doing that? Take a look at how many people did that to me and to the people who were sticking up for me in these Natalie Bollinger groups. They weren't justice for Natalie groups, or they'd been going after Natalie's family. They'd have been going after her ex-boyfriends, people who raped her, the people who beat her, the people who had her selling drugs. You got to hear from Bobby Forrest about how Alicia Bollinger and Natalie Bollinger both told him the same things that they told me about Ted Bollinger, about their family. You got to hear recordings, see recordings of my therapy appointments. Not all of them. There was a lot of them that I just didn't have room on my phone to save it. But the ones in Cheyenne, yeah. How many therapy appointments did I go to? You got to hear from Amanda Daniels, one of the people that I was going to try to visit on my trip to Virginia. You got to hear from Brett Roloff, one of the people that I was going to go visit on my trip to Virginia. You got to hear them admitting to the things that I had said from the start. You get to realize how honest I've been. You got to hear Peaches talking about that Mexican family. And all these people, every one of them, when they were going to help me. Instead of helping me, they wanted to focus on themselves and talk about themselves and their problems. I get that. I care about their problems, so I listened. Did they listen to mine, or they wanted to tell me how to think and feel? You got to hear from my dad about how he was gonna pay some stuff that he never paid, about how he was gonna help me out that way, and when he didn't help me out that way, it meant that I was actually driving around with an illegal vehicle, not even knowing it was illegal. My bank account that he helped me to set up got closed down because he didn't keep his word. But you got to hear him say that word, didn't you? Got to hear him make that lie in a video that he knew he was being recorded in. The two videos I made with my dad when he knew that he was being recorded, he was very dishonest in. You got to hear the videos between me and Miss Peaches where she didn't know she was being recorded. She was pretty damn honest, wasn't she? You got to hear the video where Miss Peaches was making a statement and she was talking about a situation she wasn't even there for. How she was bearing false witness in the video that was supposed to be her statement. Bearing false witness. I needed her to tell the truth. Talk about the situation she was there for. You got to hear how whenever I brought up the issues that I had because of Shannon Alvarado's alcoholism and the noise level because of it, and how it shut me down, you got to hear how she blamed it on her daughter. Her daughter wasn't the problem, Shannon's alcoholism was. These people's sin is pride. You got to hear from Graham. You got to hear from Tabby. There's a lot of other victims. You also got to hear from Darren O'Connor. Him talking about how those racially motivated crimes against Samuel Leon Lawrence IV and Zed Atkinson and Michelle Rodriguez are standard procedure against homeless people. And about how he was speaking about how that situation with Zed Atkinson and Samuel Leon Lawrence. It's Mariah Johnson's birthday today. She's another witness, by the way. You got to hear from Kelly Henson about CJ. When it's warm enough again for me to post stuff up, there's a lot more to show. A lot of it's in a Facebook group that Katie Cahill started. She gave it to me because she couldn't handle it anymore. She didn't have the time. The messages between me and Katie Cahill in our Facebook Messenger, it shows that she offered to be my lawyer. She offered to represent me in court. When she called me, it was from a private number. The only way to get a hold of her was through Facebook and through her email address. You got to see how the messages between myself and Rose Kelly, when I let her know what was going on at my grandma's funeral, she said, "Yeah, I know how he is. 'cause she does. You got to see that message between me and Natalie Bollinger. You got to see my hospital paperwork, stuff that I had access to. You got to see videos between me and Amanda Engeline, and there's more of those, by the way. There's a few of them that I didn't post up because they had some personal information in them. Those were on phones that I no longer have. But you know what I do still have? Some of those are actually on this computer. I found them. I'm gonna have to scroll through literally hundreds of videos, possibly thousands actually, to find those ones in specific to post up. You got to see how Amy Spencer treated me, how she accused me of abusing her children. You got to hear Rihanna admitting that I didn't, admitting that she was doing the things that I said she was doing for the reasons that I said she was doing them. You got to hear Brandon Ratner talking about Pierre and about Veronica Randall. You also got to hear me talking about a lot of situations. Most of the situations, when I was talking about them, when I first started speaking about them, I had the evidence to show. Just there was so damn much of it, and I showed as much as I could. Most of my phones were full of evidence. There was only so much I could do, only so much I could show, especially with being overwhelmed in every environment, with having to worry about disrupting people's lives too much. I got recordings on that computer that doesn't want to stay on from Chris Stegeman. You got to hear about how Amy Spencer ain't even picked up her kids. They've been released to her 2 months ago, and she still ain't picked them up. Rihanna says they're in a good foster home. I hope she's right. I hope they get to keep her. I hope they want to adopt those kids and raise them right. Teach them a different way than Amy. You got to hear how those officers treated me in many of those places. You got to hear how that security guard up there in Washington State, when she didn't like me telling the truth, she wanted to play the pregnancy thing for sympathy. She can't handle the truth because she's pregnant. Really? You got to hear from that swindler priest up there in Washington State. You got to hear from employees from Starbucks in Washington State. You got to hear from employees from the Starbucks in Cheyenne and the bullshit that they pulled. You had to see how the officers tried to violate my human rights in Cheyenne at that very same Starbucks. And about how, because a Starbucks employee there decided to lie, I almost had my window broken, got assaulted by police again. You got to hear police trying to claim that something that was written by a Starbucks employee was not. trying to claim that I had written it. You got to hear from Candace Bondurant's mother about how Candace Bondurant had to be afraid for her kids, about how she, as a nurse, didn't agree with a lot of the medical community and the way that they treat us. You got to hear from Terry Jepson about her sons, about how Brandon's an asshole, and about little Jay trying to cut off his sister's feet with a garden hoe. Kim Jepson at one point in time was my best friend in Chapel, Nebraska. Brandon Jepson at one point in time was my best friend in Chapel, Nebraska. You got to hear from Officer Will, who wanted to backtrack. There's a lot of evidence on here. You got to see some of the evidence of things that I was trying to get the police to report on, and they absolutely wouldn't. You got to hear from my public pretenders and the bullshit that they were pulling in their public pretenders' offices. You got to hear people in this town, as well as in Colorado, admitting that the people who did wrong that I was trying to turn in, about how they got to move on. That was an important tactic to prevent evidence from coming forward, prevent me from being able to summon those people into the courtroom in order to protect them from prison time for what they've done, and in return, protect the sheriff of this town from prison time. Conspiracy is a felony. Conspiring to prevent me from having an honest day in court, from showing evidence. Conspiring with hospital staff. You got to hear a lot of that stuff. The other thing is, I already knew these tactics. I'd reported on these tactics before Natalie was killed. They couldn't go the standard route, which was to just round up all the witnesses that tried to turn in them cops and arrest them all. They had to go around and intimidate these witnesses one by one. You got to hear about how officers didn't record that shit. You got to hear the public pretenders' offices saying that it was the DA's fault. The district attorney is the one who gives them the evidence they're allowed to use. Meanwhile, a real attorney, not a public pretender, but a real attorney could have gotten that evidence, would have tried to get that evidence, would have made some actual effort to talk to the witnesses, subpoena them for court. Public pretenders kept on telling me that they can't do the same things that a real attorney could do. We can't do that. We're the public pretender's office. This is what we're allowed to do. Well, if that's all you're allowed to do, then you're not allowed to defend me in court. You are prevented from defending me in court because of those things. exposing these people, exposing those situations. They're mad at me for exposing it here on YouTube and on my Facebook. But the fact is, my voice never should have been shut down. You got to hear about how Ken and Leah had done what they did to me to others prior to me. You got to hear from Leah's son's own father about the police and the FBI in Colorado, the drug use, the party scene, Ken and Leah's involvement, and how his son, just like I said, lives in his room. You got to hear from him about how self-absorbed Leah is. You even got to hear her real name out of his mouth. There's a lot of other stuff that's just in text messaging, like text messages between me and Mandy Singer about her son disappearing. Some more messages with her son, who I'm now friends with. I tried to help find him. The ones from Shauna Sinclair, they're in that Facebook group that I got from KDKL. You got to hear from Jennifer Jazowski, who works for Nancy Grace, about her outrageous claims that she never followed through with or on. You also got to hear me speaking out about these people not keeping their word. Well, these people were promising to help me and taking stuff out of context, giving the same useless advice that I'd gotten from hundreds of others that also didn't bother to find out the whole situation. When I finally got to talk to them, they wanted to talk about themselves and their own problems. Erin Cockerham, when her son's jaw got broke, I was worried about her son instead of working on my problems with her because she promised to help me. Instead, she's talking about her son, and I'm worried about that. The same thing happened with Mandy Hughes. All of these illnesses that her and her family were plagued with, the hot water heater breaking, a lot of stuff happened. The hail damage on her roof, a lot of stuff happened. And I'm worried about these people because they're telling me all this stuff about them, stuff that was their reasons for not keeping their word. Meanwhile, Officer Amanda Jonas, what did she write down on my court paperwork? She wrote that nobody would come forward, probably because of the way that I act. You got to hear from Erin Cockerham how she tried to come forward. You got to hear from Mandy Hughes about how she tried to come forward. You got to hear from Alyssa Rainwater about how she tried to come forward. You got to hear from Miss Peaches about how she tried to come forward, and from Brandon Ratner about how he tried to come forward. I'm sorry about the shaking. It's cold up here. You got to hear from Dan Faber. You got to hear how Rick treated me. Rick McCormick. Got to hear from Christine Buhit. You got to hear from Bobby Forrest. Got a lot of different stuff. You got to see how when Alicia disappeared, how I dropped everything and tried to help find her. James Payton, his nephew Seth, just wouldn't leave me the fuck alone. It was Jamie Curtis's about how I liked Jamie's new boyfriend more than I liked James. Jamie takes advantage of good men. That's what she does. She eats them up and spits them out. Like Hayden McCall. Like me. See, most of these guys that Jamie had over at her house all the damn time, most of them, she was telling them the same shit about me that she was telling me about them. But none of these guys were ever mean to her. None of these guys were ever, why don't you ask them to leave? So in that video that I made when I talked about how I like Jamie's new boyfriend more than I like James, I didn't know she was still dating James because she was dating Todd Harmon at the time. Apparently, just like Natalie when she died, Jamie was dating two dudes at the same time. You got to hear her screaming at me and claiming that she was going to lose her job because nobody's supposed to be knowing that she's dating that guy. Todd Harmon is that guy. And I didn't mention his name in that video. You know why she was angry? If you listen to that conversation between me and James Payton, you know that that's how he found out that Jamie was two-timing. That Jamie was playing him. She was playing me too. She was playing Todd Harmon too. So James called her up, according to his own admission. And that's why she called me up so hateful and wanted to play it off like it was about her job. No, it was about getting busted. Busted lying. There was a lot of conversations I didn't get to record because Mike got to see that I was still kind to that woman who stole my telephone. You got to hear from Samantha Danielle about giving Natalie and Alicia rides and what they told her about their father. The very same things I was telling you. Through all of this, all these people claiming that I molested or raped Natalie or Alicia. Not even one of them was Natalie or Alicia. But this all came from lies from Natalie and Alicia, claiming that I stalked them to Virginia. You got to see that that wasn't true. You got to see that when I was in Virginia, I didn't threaten them or their family. You got to see that, yeah, I was legitimately dehydrated. You also get to hear me admitting to the things that I did wrong. You get to hear me admitting to the fire. I told on myself, as I always have. I don't mind telling the truth. You got to hear me admitting that I lied. How I lied when I said that I would kill Ted Bollinger. I don't have it in me to kill somebody. I can't even listen to killing on TV without it traumatizing me. I just seen too many dead people. You got to hear Anna talking about the day we found Danny dead behind the pedestrian shop. There's a lot of evidence here on YouTube. My first YouTube, there was a lot of evidence too. And all of these people who hated me because of slander from the Bollingers and from the media. The police used the media. They used the media to try to destroy my voice and prevent people from hearing me. They used the media to create a hatred against me by the general public when the hatred towards me by the general public from the media was already terrible. Terrible enough that people were trying to destroy evidence on Facebook. And after that, people tried even harder. You had to sit with me while I tried to download videos with my phone. It wasn't live like it is here. How a 30 something minute video took like 5 hours to eventually get finished downloading. And it was in black and white. Imagine if I'd have recorded it in color. There's a lot more that I wanted to show. It's just the amount of space on that phone that's left for it to record things. There's a lot of evidence on that phone that I have to figure out a way to transfer it from there to my computer. The stuff before I delete it from my telephone, and after I press the delete button, it's still there. I can show you that. Now my phone is telling me it's Mariah Johnson's birthday. We'll pick something that I've already deleted off of my phone. We'll pick a video here. Something that takes a little bit. We'll pick this video right here. We'll hit the little thing in the corner and we'll see what options it gives me. Only move to archive because it's already been deleted from my phone, and as a result, it won't download to my computer. But lucky for me, I downloaded it to my computer before I deleted it. Many of the other ones, I didn't have this computer, and it wouldn't download anything to that other computer. That other computer doesn't have a camera on it. So I had to do all of my recording with this until I got this computer back from Cheyenne Police. You got to hear them bullying me. You got to hear them lying to me. You got to hear how they treated me. You got to see the harassment from the police, how they treat homeless people America-wide, how they utilize that suicide watch and outright lie about how someone being there is the difference between you being hauled off to a nuthatch on a suicide watch or you being allowed to go free. I didn't need suicide watch. I needed a police officer to do their goddamn job. I needed the FBI to do their job because the police wouldn't. Because of how many jurisdictions this harassment took place in at the hands of the police. Because of how many jurisdictions these predators who were threatening me and my friends and family were from. Because of the number of countries that I was being harassed and threatened from. Maybe Interpol needs to get involved. Yeah, I absolutely want to sue these people, and I do want to sue them for money to replace the things that were stolen from me, but also to set up a safe place so that this doesn't happen to others. And no, I can't save everyone. But the bigger a chunk of property I'm able to get, the more people I can save, the more people I can rescue. You got to hear from people about how they blocked me because I was frustrated when they didn't keep their word. And they wanted to be butthurt little bitches about it. You got to hear from Tabitha Michelle Cook about how I helped clean while I was there, about how I paid rent. You got to hear from Brandon Ratner about how I did indeed pay him to help me to move there, about how he did indeed help me on multiple occasions, and about how he apologized because he didn't go to court with me. There's a lot of people that were afraid to come forward not because of me, because they were scared of the police, and they were scared of all of the vigilantes because the police obviously weren't going to do a goddamn thing. Candace was scared of these people. She really was. But she thought that she could solve the problem by shooting them through the eyes if they came in through her door. When she realized that the police wouldn't do a goddamn thing about it, it scared the living fuck out of her. And rightly so. The evidence that was on those phones that were stolen, I've been trying to gather it back in conversations. Try to get people to admit the things that they typed in the telephones to me that I no longer have access to. You got to hear how people tried to twist the truth until it was no longer recognizable. About how they tried to twist the things that I said to mean something completely different. Things that Amanda Engeline was typing to me. Fuck this goddamn country, shoot me in the head. You got to see me having panic attacks just looking at this pile of fucking evidence that nobody wanted to look at. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The pile of shit that I went in to show the Broomfield Police Department on the 29th of December of 2017. It was a few receipts. It was my bus tickets from the day that I traveled to go see Natalie. At Natalie's request. It was a computer and a telephone. That was it. That's all that needed to be shown. pile of shit. That pile of shit. That's all evidence of the things that I've gone through and been through since Natalie died. Things that I've gone through over the slander. Things that I have gone through because police wanted to hide their wrongdoing. That's just the paperwork. That's just the paperwork. That doesn't count the thousands upon thousands of screenshots. That's not counting the USB drives Miss Peaches has. That's not counting the videos here on YouTube or on my Facebook. That's not counting the evidence that was destroyed or stolen. That's not counting the computer that I transferred all of the evidence to, the evidence that was on this computer and on that other computer that I transferred that evidence to that was stolen. That's not even counted in all of this. My hospital paperwork from Bozeman is not counted in all of this. My hospital paperwork from Longmont is not counted in all of this. My hospital paperwork from Haxton, Colorado is not included in all of this. Getting those records apparently requires a lawyer. This isn't counting the paperwork that they utilized to illegally put me into a place where I should never have had to go back to. I needed to be able to bring charges against the Scottsbluff Hospital for what they did, but I had to get out of there without being harmed further first. Meanwhile, the woman whose paperwork there in Scottsbluff prevented me from filing charges against the police there, and then they had me transferred to that hospital again over that woman lying, and they won't allow me access to that paperwork. Imagine that, somebody not even being allowed access to their own hospital paperwork. Kill me, please.